I am Nadia Benaissa. I am a lawyer and a policy advisor at Bits of Freedom. We are a Dutch digital rights organization. And in my work, I focus on AI. And we were asked as a civil society to stress the importance of the protection of human rights when using AI. So in the last couple of years, we've seen many examples of how AI has had an impact on people's lives and society as a whole, and how human rights have been violated by AI use. We've seen cases of discrimination against ethnic minorities, women, LGBTQ communities, and so on. We've seen cases of illegal mass and biometric surveillance. We've seen violations of the right to privacy, and we've seen how people's autonomy has been attacked by manipulation. So in the Netherlands, we have a very specific case in which the Dutch tax authority has used AI for racist purposes, while hunting on fraud cases in which parents might have received unlawful child benefits allowance. The tax authority thought that people with a second nationality, meaning ethnic minorities, and people with a low income, meaning people who need the benefit most, might have a higher risk of committing fraud. And so these assumptions were input for AI, and many people were categorized as fraudsters. And the allowances, in many cases, thousands of euros, were recovered, and people lost their jobs because they couldn't afford daycare anymore. People have lost their houses because the debts were unpayable, and this has led to broken homes in which children were removed from their parents because they were growing up in poverty. So this was all the result of a racist and social economically discriminating system, and not by accident, because many people involved knew what they were doing and knew the effects, what the effects were on people. And these people, for a very long time, were unable to defend themselves. They didn't know why all this happened to them. They were sure some kind of mistake must have been made, but they were unable to prove it. And for years, and within these years, lives of parents and children were completely destroyed. So after this, we don't need a lot of imagination to know why the protection of human rights is important when using AI. But we do still need imagination to think about ways of how AI use can have an impact on fundamental rights in the future, because although we've seen quite a lot of examples already, we're sure we haven't seen it all yet, and there's much more to come. So what we need to keep in mind is that we face serious problems in our societies. We face discrimination, lack of freedom of speech, lack of freedom of religion, violations of the right to privacy, and so on and so forth. So the standards that many countries have agreed upon many years ago when it comes to fundamental rights are still not effective in reality. Therefore, it isn't strange that the data that comes from these societies are a reflection of the problems we're facing. The data isn't neutral, it isn't objective, because society isn't. So that is something we need to be aware of also in coming AI legislation. So in the European law proposal, the Artificial Intelligence Act, many promises were made by the European Commission in the white paper and in the preamble of the proposal that fundamental rights need to be protected and that there should be an ecosystem of trust, which is great. But as soon as we move to the actual articles, the protection of human rights seems nowhere to be found. And this is why civil society organizations, 120 of us, last week published a joint statement in which we call for Artificial Intelligence Act, which foregrounds fundamental rights, starting with actual prohibitions on AI systems posing an unacceptable risk to fundamental rights. Although some prohibitions have already been introduced in the law proposal. These prohibitions are defined very narrowly, and the exceptions are defined very broadly, which leaves us practically with no prohibitions at all. And we also feel that the list of prohibitions is by far complete. We also need to see included obligations on users of AI systems, especially high-risk AI systems, to facilitate accountability to those impacted by AI systems, including the obligation to publish fundamental rights impact assessment. Also, we need consistent and meaningful transparency and meaningful rights and redress for people impacted by AI systems, including the right to explanation for decisions taken with the assistance of AI systems, and the right to judicial remedy. Knowing how AI system works is not sufficient. People need to know, need to be able to find out what has led to a decision in their specific case. So please do take a look at our statement, which we've made with European Digital Rights and many other organizations. I will put it in the chat as well, because these issues I've just mentioned and the other issues that we've mentioned in the joint statement should have been concluded from the start. This is the time in which we should move from words to deeds and show how much we truly value the protection of human rights. Not only by mentioning them and promising AI is changing the world, but we are in charge when it comes to imagining of a world we want to live in, which means we need to set a legal standard in which AI use is future-proof and fundamental rights are effectively protected. Thank you so much.